China will win the World Cup by 2050. That is what President Xi Jinping famously declared in a memo published by the Chinese Football Association on April the 11th, 2016. China will host the World Cup. China will build 70,000 football pitches nationwide. China will build 50,000 football playing schools by 2025. Those were the other things declared in that famous memo by President Xi. You see, President Xi's grand plan envisioned China becoming a soccer superpower by mid-century. He made football a national priority as he looked to shake off China's patchy results on and off the pitch in recent decades. The vision spurred one of the wildest spending sprees in recent football history, with very expensive player transfers and very expensive club acquisitions off the pitch too. However, shortly after, in one of the most dramatic political U-turns ever, things started crashing down, causing national turmoil in China, and some of those effects being felt here in Europe and the UK today. I'm Jordan, and I'm on a mission to make passionate sports fans like you just 1% more informed. Today is a cautionary tale about sports and politics wrapped in a beautiful long play wrapper, full of big spending and football business. So without further ado, we're going to tell the story of China trying to buy football. And we're going to start with all those players that famously went to go and play in China in those famous few years. And we're going to start with him, and him. Yes, Oscar, Hulk and Ramirez were just three of the many transfers that happened to China at that time. They joined Shanghai SIPG, Shanghai again, and Jiangsu Suning respectively. On top of that though were several other players, including Jackson Martinez, Axel Witsel, Cedric Bakambu, Yannick Carrasco, Alexandra Pato, Stefan Ambia, Marouane Fellaini, Paulinho, Alex Teixeira, Ezekiel Lavezzi, Gervinho, Demba Ba, and Marco Arnautovic. All of them left their clubs and went to go and apply their trade in China. It was a wild influx of talent, and there were two main attractions for them doing so. The first is being a part of this story. President Xi's plan was a big one, and it was exciting at the time. The second, of course, was the money. Those transfer fees were large, but the wages were crazy in some cases too. One person I didn't name in that list was Carlos Tevez. He went to play in China too and signed for Shanghai Shenhua in 2016. Despite only being there for 7 months, he was reportedly paid £615,000 a week for doing so. If you've been a follower of my channel, you'll know I've spoken about Carlos Tevez's wages before. That man knows how to get to a bag. But that was just the money spent in China. President Xi's vision inspired a lot of money to be spent outside of China too. And a lot of you watching are supporting teams who are feeling the effects of this right now. This man is Wang Jianlin, a Chinese billionaire. He kicked things off by buying a 20% stake in Atletico Madrid for 45 million euros in 2015. He made his investment through the Wanda Group, a massive Chinese company. And some of you may know, Atletico's stadium became the Wanda Metropolitano a few years later. Not long after, a Chinese consortium, CMC, paid 400 million euros for a 13% stake in City Football Group, Manchester City's parent company. Yes, the City Football Group, led by the Abu Dhabi state, were minority controlled by China too in its initial stages. In Italy, electronics retailer Suning Holdings paid 270 million euros for a controlling stake in Inter Milan. We're going to get back to them later. But just across the road, also in Milan, the biggest deal came from AC Milan. Silvio Berlusconi sold his stake in AC Milan to a Chinese investment company for 740 million euros. To date, that is the biggest Chinese investment in European football, but just showed you the influx of money in European football was crazy at the time. Here in the UK, Aston Villa, Wolves, Reading, and West Brom all saw investment from Chinese companies. Remember President Xi's famous memo? It was published in April of 2016. By mid-2017, 20 European clubs had seen Chinese investment. Reuters tallied that Chinese investment in European football had surpassed $3 billion in value. The Chinese exposure to European football was fast and intentional, and the footprint was starting to take shape. Before we continue, just a word from me, my platform has grown massively in the past few weeks. Thank you to anyone who has liked, watched, or commented on any video that I've ever made. Some of the messages that you guys send me are so humbling and just overwhelming to read. I really appreciate it when you do that. But it always surprises me how many people aren't subscribed. If you're one of those people who are watching but aren't subscribed, hit the subscribe button just there. It means the world to me when you do that. Now, I'm gonna get back to this story because, amazing. In late 2017, Chinese authorities pumped the brakes on what they deemed to be an overheated, risky football investment bubble. This is despite the rhetoric President Xi was giving not that long before. In fact, President Xi proclaimed to be a big fan of football. In 2015, he visited the UK and took a trip to Manchester on his journey. He took a famous picture with Sergio Kun Aguero and at the time, Prime Minister David Cameron. I'm telling you, that picture is up there in the random picture folklore alongside Trey Songz and Phil Mitchell. Like, what on earth was going on there? But in 2017, things were going backwards. In July of that year, Chinese state-controlled media aired a 25-minute feature criticizing the debt-fueled purchases of European football clubs by some of the famous Chinese companies and Chinese entrepreneurs. They used Sunning's Inter Milan purchase as a highlight of their example. The famous club has lost money for 5 straight years and has totaled losses of 275 million euros, the narrator said. What is the purpose of acquisitions like these? Can you imagine the British government airing a show on the BBC saying, Man United have been losing money and underperforming for several years. So Jim Ratcliffe, why did you buy the club? Oh, and Jim, I see the vision, bro. Carry on doing what you're doing. Then, 1 month later, in August of that year, China's State Council issued guidelines categorizing overseas investments in real estate and football clubs as restricted. Banks were reportedly stopped from providing credit for some of these individuals and companies investing overseas in 2017 too. This was a dramatic shift from just 2 years ago when cheap credit was given to anyone who wanted it. And then the big blow was the salary cap. The Chinese FA introduced a steep 100% luxury tax on foreign transfers over a certain value. If a club made a transfer for a player for more than 45 million Chinese yuan, which was around $6 or $7 million at the time, they had to pay a 100% tax to a youth development fund. So if a player was worth £10 million and a Chinese club were interested in buying that player, they would have to pay another £10 million to fund youth football development back home in China, effectively making that player £20 million. This doubled the cost of big transfers, and as you can imagine, they stopped immediately. The aftermath, it was catastrophic, my word. If you made it this far, then thank you. China is a cautionary tale, thinking that football is something that can be bought and can change the fortunes of your state. The crazy thing is, history is repeating itself right now in the Middle East, and I'm here to tell you all about it. I am building a series on Saudi Arabia's impact on global sport. It's episodic, and it's 1 episode per sport. Football, boxing, golf, Formula One, esports, and anything else that Saudi Arabia has dabbled in. I'm going to release it in a few months' time. So if you want early access, click the link in the description and enter your email address in the box. I'm excited. There's so much in there. It's some of the best content I've ever created. We're going to get back to the aftermath of the Chinese U-turn in just a second. Before that, I hope Saudi delegates watched the Chinese implosion, because I see 2 main lessons here. You can't force success in football. Building a competitive football ecosystem requires patient development of players, coaches, broadcast relationships, and general fan culture. Despite investing billions, China did not improve its national team, and its domestic league didn't get any better either, despite having loads of great players. In addition, a big reason President Xi made this leap into football was for power and prestige on a global scale. A rebranding exercise, if you will. That, as I mentioned, is eerily similar to what's happening in Saudi Arabia. The U-turn by President Xi and the Chinese state was because a lot of these acquisitions were fueled by debt. A lot of these companies were using leverage to buy these assets, and they were levered up to the gills. Admittedly, there's not that much leverage happening in Saudi. These guys are walking cash pits, but the political and economic winds change all the time. And as you will see from my Saudi series, the macroeconomic conditions in Saudi Arabia aren't that rosy either. What's in favor today might not be in favor tomorrow. And when football is in the mix of those things, too many people are affected. There's no better example of that than Inter Milan. Towards the end of the 2010s, many of the overseas investments by Chinese companies and individuals were starting to be undone. By 2019, the number of Chinese-owned clubs had dwindled to 10. Remember, it was above 20 in 2017. Those that remained often faced financial strain, and they were probably still there because they just couldn't get out. Inter Milan were arguably the jewel of the Chinese investment spree. They won the Scudetto around this time too, and were owned by Sunning Holdings. They were fronted by a chap called Stephen Zhang. But Sunning Holdings is a name I've mentioned a few times in this story so far. Remember, they were the ones that were getting slagged off in the Chinese press not too long before. Due to the reversal in capital controls by President Xi, Stephen Zhang couldn't capitalize the club. He needed a loan to secure Inter Milan's financial future. He was searching for funding, and a private equity company from America called Oaktree sensed an opportunity. They said, Steven, we're going to lend you the money, but there's going to be 3 conditions. 1, we're going to take 31% of the club. 2, the interest rate is going to be high, 12%. 3, if you don't pay us back by May of 2024, you got 3 years, we're going to take control of the club. Steven was desperate at the time, but he said, sure, I'll take the money and I'll sign these conditions. I'll be fine. The Super League is coming. Oh my word. That deal fell apart. Steven Zhang couldn't pay, and Oaktree took control of Inter Milan. Yes, at the time of recording this video, Oaktree Capital owned Inter Milan. Steven Zhang lost his assets. It's insane, and what's crazier is something very similar happened across the road at AC Milan with Redbird Capital just a year before that too. Back home, President Xi's U-turn did not help the domestic league either. The most shocking case was Jiangsu FC, owned by Suning Holdings. Again, that Suning name just keeps coming up. In the 2010s, the winners of the Chinese Super League looked like this. In November of 2020, Jiangsu FC won the championship, beating the mighty Guangzhou Evergrande and winning their first ever title. 3 months later, in February 2021, the club ceased operations. Can you believe that? The club just won the league and then folded 3 months later because the Suning Group decided to stop all non-core business activity. Jiangsu's players were left stranded. The city lost its club overnight. It underlined a dramatic U-turn. Not even winning the league could save the club when the owners can't fund the organization. The mighty Guangzhou Evergrande of the 2010s had a rough spot too. Their parent company, the Evergrande Group, went through a massive debt crisis in the late 2010s, and it severely impacted the football team. Expensive players were released, salaries were slashed, and in 2022, they got relegated to the 2nd division of Chinese football. Yes, these guys relegated. Honestly, researching some of this stuff was harrowing to read. The impact of the U-turn, insane. Of course, the ultimate goal of all of this was to make China's national team a success. In the midst of all of this, I didn't mention, they appointed some pretty successful managers, Marcelo Lippi and Fabio Cannavaro, to try and rebuild the national pride of China. The 2018 World Cup, China failed to qualify. The 2022 World Cup, China failed to qualify. And I'm recording this video in early May 2025. China's FIFA rankings right now, 94th. I'm telling you, there are eerie similarities to what's happening in China, to what's happening in Saudi Arabia. I'm making a series on it, so put your name on the waitlist to get early access to that when I release it in a few months' time. But let this be a lesson to you all. Pumping millions, or even billions in this case, into a sports project is not a guaranteed recipe for success. Also, building a footballing nation to be successful is not an easy task. It takes generations. It truly is a long play. There's so much in this. So many of those players got paid a crazy amount of money to go and play in China. If you want to see other ways in which footballers get paid, click right here. But there is an established league in Europe also going through a rough spot right now. If you want to see that story, and it's a crazy one, click here. I'm Jordan, and as always, thank you for watching.